Good morning. I am Charles Chrestman, and today is August the 23rd. I hope you and yours are doing well. Today we'll be studying in the Old Testament book, Song of Songs. This will be our first lesson from this material that chronicles Solomon's romantic relationship with a Shulamite woman. Solomon himself will be speaking in this material, and the poem contains four other voices: the woman, the young women, the narrator, and the brothers. The voices blend together to produce rich insights into God's wisdom relating to relationships, love, romance, and marriage. If you would like to follow along when we read the focal passages, grab your Bible and turn over to the Song of Songs. If you have an Explore the Bible study guide, turn to session 12 on page 109, and we'll be ready to get started. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're moving on from Proverbs to another book that Solomon is given credit for authoring in the Old Testament, Song of Songs. The full name for this book is the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. It is often called the Song of Solomon, but we should note here that the Hebrew idiom Song of Songs actually means the best song, which probably infers that it's the best song of Solomon. No other book in the Bible, except perhaps Revelation, suffers under so many radically different interpretations as this particular book. Some of the major approaches to the interpretation of the book include allegorical interpretation, dramatic interpretation, wedding song interpretation, and love song interpretation. After today's lesson and the one next week, we can decide for ourselves kind of which category it might best fit into. Anyway, according to one source, it is difficult to date this book, especially when it comes to dating it for when it might have been written. Part of this has to do with the vocabulary used in the book. Other factors that impact the dating of the book have to do with geographical evidence, cultural evidence, and literary evidence that's found in it as you read through it. The bottom line, far as I'm concerned, is that Song of Songs should be taken as it stands. So we look at it in that context and move on. As we start today's lesson, it might be wise for us to remind ourselves that the Bible is meant to serve as a guide in every aspect of life. So Song of Songs deals with one universal aspect of human life: love, marriage, and sexuality. A few notes for today's lesson, the first of which is that today's lesson it has to do with people that need direction and teaching in the matter of how to nurture love for a spouse, just as they need guidance in other areas of life. Second, Song of Songs teaches by example and not a decree. Its message is clear. Third, Song of Songs celebrates love between a man and a woman. It's something that is valid and beautiful even in a fallen and sinful world. Fourth, the Song of Songs is unlike its ancient Near East counterparts in one significant respect. It does not turn sexuality into a sacred ritual. Wrapping this up, the Song of Songs is simply a song of love and affirmation related to the value of the bond between a man and a woman. In this way, it adds greatly to our appreciation of God's creation. As we look at the context for today's lesson, let me note that in the first verse of the poem, Solomon comes into view. He is about to deliver his finest poem. Then a woman speaks, and she introduces herself by way of her longing to be with the man. We're told that she is from Kedar. Her skin is brown and shows the effects of working long hours in the sun taking care of a vineyard. But the man sees her as perfectly beautiful. Their conversation swirls around their obvious attraction to each other and their growing love for one another. Following their conversation, the woman cautions the women of Jerusalem about waiting until the right time to awaken love. Now, what happens next in the poem can best be understood as an invitation. The man invites the woman to join him for a stroll through the vineyard on a spring day. They talk about the threats to their relationship, among other things. She encourages him to guard the love they share and affirms their devotion. She then describes what appears to be a dream or a nightmare. She awakens in the night and realizes she is alone. Her longing for the man makes her leave her bedroom and search for him in the city. She is eventually reunited with him, etc. And we'll see what happens with the rest of this as we go through today's lesson. As we continue in chapter 2, the setting for our first focal passage takes us to the vineyard in springtime. So let's take a look at that first focal passage, which is taken from chapter 2 in verse 15. This is what it says: "Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, for our vineyards are in bloom." As the man and woman walk through the vineyard, they're soaking up the beauty of the setting. That is when one of them brought up the little foxes that could invade their vineyard. So what were the little foxes? They were the destructive influences that can come into a relationship. Like little foxes that gnaw away at the grapevines, tiny distractions in a marriage can do the same thing. The distractions may seem harmless at first, but before long, the distractions can damage a relationship. Wise couples know the value of spending time together and how to protect their relationship from such predators. Let's take a look at today's second focal passage as we continue moving down this road. It reads, "My love is mine and I am his. He feeds among the lilies. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, turn around, my love, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the divided mountains." I want you to notice how dedicated the soon-to-be husband and wife are to each other. Their devotion kind of shines through her declaration that she belongs to him and he belongs to her. By declaring their mutual devotion, she affirms the depth of love that God intends for couples to enjoy. In verse 17, the woman goes on to describe how their intimacy would be expressed after they married. Her description shows their trust in one another. Respecting each other and treating one another with honor renders the perfect setting for the depth of intimacy God intends for married couples. So as we move into chapter 3, we find a short lesson about practicing restraint and romance. And that gets us to our third focal passage. It is taken from chapter 3, verses 1 through 5, and reads as follows. "In my bed at night I sought the one I love. I sought him, but did not find him. I will arise now and go about the city, through the streets and the plazas. I will seek the one I love. I sought him, but did not find him. The guards who go about the city found me. I asked them, 'Have you seen the one I love?' I had just passed them when I found the one I love. I held on to him and would not let him go until I brought him to my mother's house, to the chamber of the one who conceived me. Young women of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and the wild does of the field, do not stir or awaken love until the appropriate time." I'm sure you noticed that the chapter begins with the woman trying to rest in her bed, but she appears to be dreaming. She is restless because she can't find the man whom she refers to as the one I love. She is all alone and she misses him terribly. In the middle of the night, she goes through the city searching for him. Her agony seems to get worse as she searches up and down various streets and inspects plazas. Finally, she is confronted by guards, and they join in the search. Eventually, she found the man for whom she had been searching and carried him to a room in her mother's house. In verse 5, the woman turns her attention to the young women of Jerusalem. They would appreciate her dilemma and might also be facing the temptations she was feeling. She then commands them to be wise and commit themselves to practicing restraint. In fact, she presents a serious warning about stirring or awakening love before marriage. She goes on to warn the young women to wait until the appropriate time for sexual intimacy. In other words, restraint should be practiced until after the wedding. In summary, we all know that a healthy, positive relationships matter. As we have seen in today's lesson, Song of Songs portrays a picture of romantic love between a man and a woman through poetic, lyrical language. One of the things that Song of Songs does is reflect the ideal love described in Genesis chapter 2, verses 23 through 25. As we have seen in today's lesson, intimate relationships require attention and time to flourish. There is a need to build trust and develop honor between the man and the woman. Restraint is required as a couple moves toward their wedding day. God created us to be relational, and He gave them a roadmap to follow in order to maximize a healthy and positive relationship. If we follow this roadmap, then all we have to do is watch for the little foxes. Folks, thank you for joining us today. It's an interesting lesson. Next Sunday's lesson is entitled Relational Investments. I'm sure that lesson's going to have to do with the kind of investments that a couple must make in their relationship if they're going to have the kind of relationship that God would like for them to have. If you have the time, I hope you'll join us next Sunday as we cover this content from Song of Songs. Hope you have a great week. Thank you for joining us.